Hey guys, it's Miss Austin here. Today we're going to take some notes on solving one-step equations. So at this point you should have this glued in your journal already. We are on page 39 in your journal. Okay, so when we're solving one-step equations, we are only required one step to solve. We're going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. And the way we do that is by using the inverse operation. It's like working backwards, or the opposite operation. And we look at the number that's closest to our variable, and we have to do the opposite to move it and get rid of it. So here says some number plus 7 equals 3. Well, we're trying to get rid of this plus 7, so the inverse or the opposite is to subtract 7. And we do that on both sides of that equal sign. So we would subtract 7 to get rid of it, subtract 7 here. So now we have x equals 3 minus 7. And in your calculator, 3 minus 7 is negative 4. And the way we check is we substitute back in for our x. So we put negative 4 plus 7 equals 3. And when we reduce that, we get 3 equals 3. Well, since that is a true statement, that tells us that negative 4 is the solution for our variable. All right, our next example, some number minus 9 equals 3. Well, we're trying to move this right here. And the opposite of minus 9 is to add the 9. And we do that on each side of our equal sign. So now we have y equals 3 plus 9. And 3 plus 9 is 12. And the way we check is we substitute y with 12. And we rewrite that equation. 12 minus 9 is 3. And since that is a true statement, 12 is the correct solution for that variable. All right, next example. We have some number plus 8 equals 2. We're trying to move this plus 8. So the inverse operation is to subtract it. And we do that from each side. So now we've got m equals 2 minus 8. In your calculator, make sure you double check this because it makes a huge difference if you get a positive or a negative 6. It can change the outcome. So we have m equals negative 6, and we substitute the negative 6 for our variable. We add 8, and since 2 equals 2, negative 6 is the correct answer for that missing variable. All right, here we have 6 times some number. Remember, whenever you see parentheses or if they're just touching like this, it means they're multiplying. So the opposite of multiplying is to divide. So I'm going to divide each side by 6. So now my problem is g equals 42 divided by 6, which is 7. I substitute that back in, 6 times 7. And since that is true, 7 is the correct solution. On this one, there's more than one way you can do this. I've taught the way where you can divide by your coefficient, just like you did here with 6. You would divide each side by your half. The other way is to multiply by its reciprocal. So whenever you have a fraction, what we're going to do is we're going to flip it and change it to 2 over 1. So now to solve that, we're still going to multiply, but we're multiplying by its reciprocal. And 2 over the 1 is the same as 2. So 7 times 2, which is 14. So what this means is half of 14 equals 7. And that is a true statement. Now, if it makes more sense to you, if you wanted to go back and do the same process, you could change this to a decimal, or you could do in the calculator, you could do 7 divided by my coefficient of half, and you would still get the same answer. All right. This says 3 times a number is 39. Well, the opposite of multiplying by my coefficient is to divide. So I'm going to divide each side by 3. And I get 13. And if I were to check that in my calculator, 3 times 13, it does give me 39. So 13 is the correct solution. Don't mistake this part as your solution. This is just going back and checking. This value of your variable is your solution. All right, and the last one on this page is 7 plus a number equals 9. Well, the opposite of adding the 7 is to subtract it. We're going to subtract the 7 because we're trying to get our variable all alone. So we have k equals 9 minus 7, which is 2. So if I go back in, 7 plus 2 does equal 9. So 2 is our correct solution. Okay, now we are moving to the next page. You should be on page 40 in your journal, page 40. Same process. I'm trying to get x all alone. The opposite of negative 10 or subtracting that 10 is to add it. I'm adding 10 to each side. So now I have x equals 38 plus 10, which is 48. And I put that back in my calculator to verify that's a true statement. So that's your solution. This one I have negative 12 times b because it's touching with no operation in between. So the opposite of multiplying is to divide. Don't forget that negative sign on your coefficient. It doesn't go away. So I divide each side by negative 12. I get b equals 48 divided by negative 12, which is negative 4. I substitute back and make sure that's correct. And that is correct. All right. On this one, you can either do 4 divided by your coefficient, and you would do alpha y equals to keep this. Or you can do its reciprocal, which is 5 over 2, and you would still multiply. So you would do 4 times 5 over 2, and that would be 10. So what I would do is I would substitute back in 2/5 times 10 equals 4, which is a true statement. So 10 is my correct solution. Okay, on this one we have 7 times w equals 16. Well, the opposite of multiplying times 7 is to divide by 7. I divide each side by 7. Now, since this is not going to be a whole number and you cannot reduce it, I would leave it in this form right here. And then you would type in your calculator 7 times 16 over 7. And I can show you. So 7 times, I would do alpha y equals to put my fraction in. 16 over 7, hit enter, and I do get 16. So that is a correct answer, 16 over 7. This says 5 plus some number is negative 13. Well, the opposite would be to subtract the 5 to move it. Do that to both sides. So I've got p equals negative 13 minus 5, which is negative 18. If I substitute that back in, 5